Hi everybody, hope you're doing marvellously well. We're big, we're bad, we're almost in black with another FAQ Friday. Frequently Asked Questions Friday. So I hope you all had a marvellous week. Quick recap, this was a fun week. We started off with the 5 tips that no one uses. That came out of the fact that years ago somebody showed me how to play Pro Tools at half speed by putting Shift and then spacebar. And then I thought, well, if you go, Command spacebar, that's one way of going into record, or hitting the 3 on the numerical keyboard part. So I thought to myself, I wonder what happens if I go Shift, Command, spacebar. And lo and behold, it did actually record at half speed, meaning playing back 1 octave higher. So that was a fun episode to do because we played back at half speed and also recorded at half speed. A couple of other things, like obvious things, like using the snare sample, which we talked about before, the Andy Wallace trick, to trigger reverb, but not necessarily using the snare sample. So it gives a very unique reverb behind the snare. Doesn't have the bleed of the hi-hat or cymbals or toms or whatever in there. So that's quite a fun tip. Then we went into a couple of really fun plugin demos this week. We demoed yesterday the Denise Audio, the God mode, which is a really fun way of taking saturation in different frequency areas and literally selecting them and boosting them. And what I found quite fun was using it as an EQ. So I took like some low end and boosted it dramatically and saturated it on a kick drum, and then high passed and low passed it. So I kept it really tight to about 20 hertz and then took all of the high end with a low pass filter and came in and focused the low end on the kick drum. So did that with a multi-mic element of the kick, and then the other part, of course, was for the more of the click. Same thing on a bass guitar. It's a really fun thing to do. Then I opened up about 30 instances of this and found that you could run a session with 30 instances on it. So I'm thinking to myself, I could EQ using this and add saturation. Perfect for that sort of lifeless recording that you might get to mix, or when you're only using virtual instruments. So something to kind of add some grit to it. Really, really fun plugin, and like everything Denise Audio, simple to use, really well laid out, and totally and completely and utterly affordable. A $40 plugin. Not a special offer, only $40, but an actual $40 plugin. Then earlier in the week on Tuesday, we did the Oak Sound Spiff. Oak Sound are a great company. Again, another small company making a handful of really good plugins. As you know, the Smooth, and of course now the Smooth 2, is becoming a little bit of an industry standard amongst, A-list mixers. So many people love it. The fact that it can get in there on the high mids in particular, where your ears are really sensitive, and control some of those, extra S's and T's, and just areas that are just too aggressive and bring them in is beautiful. But with the Smooth 2, I managed to kind of get in there and control a lot more. Now the Spiff comes along and really is a rather wonderful plugin. This is another great frequency conscious plugin. The Spiff, like the God mode by Denise Audio, allows you to focus on certain frequencies. With the God mode, it allows you to saturate certain frequencies and then shape them. With the Spiff, it allows you to enhance particular characteristics, meaning you could take an acoustic guitar and either get in there and pull down some of the excessive transients, or the reverse, exaggerate them, make things sound even more dynamic. It's a really, really great plugin. I really enjoyed using it. Again, hitting out of the park, Oak Sound and Denise Audio, 2 really great, smaller, I suppose we would technically call them boutique companies. Last but not means least, we talked to our good friend David Nozzi at Mixbus TV. A great YouTube channel if you don't already watch it. I'm sure many of you do. He's got a very successful channel. And we did a course with him. So there's a course on mixing modern rock. He shows how he works in a hybrid fashion. It's one of the number one questions I get asked. Lots of you, many of you are working in the box, but many of you want to experiment and work in a hybrid fashion. You ask how I work hybrid through the console and outboard. And with him, he uses less outboard than me, but really is very strategic about what outboard he uses. So it's a really great course. You should check it out. So here we are. We're back with another Frequently Asked Questions Friday. If you haven't already, please subscribe, hit the like bell. I'd really appreciate it. And don't forget to leave a bunch of comments and questions below, particularly questions for future FAQ Fridays. And of course, you can go to Produce Like a Pro and sign up for the email list and get a whole bunch of free goodies. Okay, let's get stuck into some questions. Do studios and producers ever play band matchmaker? For instance, has an artist working alone ever sent you a DIY album that you thought had good writing, was well recorded and ready to mix, but with the addition of other great players, they would really raise the creativity and make it even better still? When I first read the question, I wanted to sort of emphasize your first part where you said, do studio/producers ever play band matchmaker? And the reason why I really love that question is because for me, I really love helping elevate in all ways. We talk a lot about empowering people. How about when an artist comes into the studio, they may have a good song or a great voice, but they may only have one of those things. Maybe they have a really cool voice, but the songs aren't great. And sometimes time is short and you find some covers, you maybe take one of the songs they've worked with and you try to rewrite it the best that you possibly can. But to me, the ultimate is when I get to work with an artist and I get to help them become more of themselves. That I can co-write with them, I can find great players to work with them, but more importantly, if they're already instrumentalists themselves, help elevate them and have them walk out of the studio a better songwriter, a better singer, a better instrumentalist, a better understanding of production, whatever it might be. To me, that is the most rewarding thing about what we do. There are tools available, as you know, that can time things up and tune things up and make everything, quote unquote, perfect or better. But there's nothing more rewarding than knowing that the artist you're working with is growing from the experience of working with you. So I will bring in other players where necessary, but not at the expense of getting something better from the artist. Trevor Hall did 2 albums and an EP with us, 2 EPs and 2 albums. And both his albums, Chapter of the Forest and Carla, are very successful for him. His number 1 song on Spotify is a song off of Chapter of the Forest. He played drums on it. He played electric guitar, acoustic guitar, percussion, sang. And we brought in occasional other people to play along with him. But 90% of it, plus the program he was doing, 90% of those records is played entirely by him. And it was amazing to have him play drums on a track, have him play banjo. He learned to play banjo, my old crappy banjo, beaten up banjo. Mandolin, all of this kind of stuff, to watch him completely grow and become a better artist by the experience. Christina Holmes, same thing. She came in, she played some drums, she played some bass, and before you know it, she's playing every instrument on the record with maybe, I played 1 or 2 bass lines, a couple of electric parts, but ultimately she played the bass, she played guitar, she played drums, she played some keys. And yes, time helps. If you've got a few extra days in the budget to work with the artist, the better. And there will be times when you have a couple of days to do something that would take a week to do absolutely amazing with the artist. But if you can do that, help them grow. And there's a reason why I've done 2 albums with Trevor and a couple of EPs and 2 albums with Christina. My point is I've done multiple records with artists because they want to come back and work with you. I did 3 Ace Frehley albums. I've done 2 or 3 Rick Springfield albums. It's having relationships with artists where you are making the best of their music. I mean, it's easy with guys like Rick and Ace and of course Trevor and Christina because they're all incredibly talented. But it's applying that idea to everybody you work with, giving them the benefit of the doubt that they can do it and then helping them grow as an artist. So, very long answer. But the 2 things I wanted to talk about, getting back to the beginning of your question, is I do play band matchmaker, not as much in the studio, but afterwards. We're developing an artist at the moment, and we did auditions, and we found an amazing band, absolutely amazing band from the auditions. And I got involved in that because it's more my job is to consult and help develop. Not only am I co-writing the songs and playing on the songs and, recording the songs, producing the songs, I'm also helping find the players to help present that artist in the best possible way. And so many times artists come in with 1 or 2 instrumentalists and we do bring in session players or I'll play it. But ultimately we want them to not just walk out of an amazing recording, but be able to replicate it. Is it my job? Not necessarily the job description of a producer, But I've been an artist. I've had record deals. I've had songs in the charts. I played Reading Rock Festival. I toured the world. I've done all these things. So I have a multiple set of A&R. I have a multiple set of skills that I can bring to bear in every situation. And so I think it's knowing the secret, and the answer to your question is yes, yes, and yes, but knowing when to apply them. When do you go, singer, I love what you're doing, but you're not good enough to play drums. We need to bring in a drummer. It's knowing when to do that and when to just encourage and get the great performance. Quite often with younger drummers or inexperienced drummers, I just work with them a lot to get the results that I want. If I want a super dry, dead drum sound, I might just do the kick all the way down, then the snare all the way down, then the hat down, and then tom fills and a few cymbal hits, and compile it out of like 4 or 5 different microphones. And it sounds fantastic. And most average drummers can do that with you. And you just work with them and you get it to sound fantastic. So learn when to take your skill set and use it, and learn when to back the heck off and encourage your artists. It goes back to Dave Jordan, God bless him, who said, sometimes you have to pull a song apart. Sometimes you have to rewrite it, re-record it, change the arrangement, everything. And other times you just have to get out of the way of the artist and help them make a great record. So there's the skill set. It is knowing when to do any one of those combinations of extremes of redoing it from scratch or just coaxing performances. There's so much integral in that. Having one skill set might work. Maybe you get a hit song and then everybody comes to you for that one sound. But there's going to be a period where you wake up one morning and that one sound that you do, ship has sailed. Nobody's interested in that really great reggaeton, death metal, Icelandic, hip hop thing that you did. It's no longer hip. So the point is like, grow your skill set. Really get really good so you can do the things that are in your question, that you can help an artist, you can help development and grow. And I know I talk about this a lot, but it's one of the things I take pride in is helping people get better at their craft. Even if it's just arranging their songs so they understand basic structure of songs. It's wonderful. And then they come back to me a year later to make another record and they've got all of that under their belt. They understand all that stuff. It's really a fantastic and rewarding experience. After cutting for corrective EQ, do you increase the volume on the channel fader in order to make up the loss of presence in the mix? Or does this completely defeat the purpose of cutting for corrective EQ? I'm having an issue with the mid-frequencies specifically. I think the quick answer is yes, I do. If you're mixing and you hear something offensive and you pull it down, there may well be a massive perceptible loss in the volume of the instrument. It really depends on how you define it. But if I'm going to correct that, I don't do it on the channel fader. I do it inside of the plugin. Some plugins have AGs, automatic gains, and you can just, as you pull out certain frequencies, it adjusts. You boost certain frequencies, it adjusts down. There are things that have that. But ultimately, go in and out of bypass and see if you can get that gain to be somewhat similar to perceptible, the same kind of volume, so that you're not just mixing twice everything. You're not just mixing a basic volume mix, then going in and doing corrective EQ. Ultimately, sometimes you can cut something or you can boost something without having to use volume, meaning instead of turning something up, I might increase a certain like high mid frequency to help it cut through. I don't need to turn it up. Or sometimes I just turn it up and I don't need to boost anything, but I might need to cut some lows because turning it up is adding some low mids and some low end that's kind of creating some mud down there. So I might roll off that low end on those low mids. It's really a case-by-case study, but ultimately, yes, I do use the gain control on the EQ plugin to readjust, typically to do that. However, when you're moving fast and you're working, you do what works. So sometimes you're really clever and you cut it by 3 dB and you find you have to turn it up by a dB. And sometimes you just do a quick cut and then you adjust the fader. I think ultimately, cut yourself some slack and realize that there's a lot more to mixing than, an analytical approach. A lot of it is instinctive, and sometimes people will adjust the gain going into a plugin to hit it harder. Sometimes they'll leave it clean. They'll EQ and then add some saturation afterwards. Sometimes they saturate before going to EQ. Sometimes they compress before EQ. Sometimes they compress afterwards. Sometimes they use gain controls to reduce volumes. Sometimes if I want to adjust the volume of a guitar in a mix and I've written in automation and I don't want to mess with volume automation rights, I just turn the plugin down a dB. I can give you many different instances and different solutions, but ultimately there is no one way to do anything. Just learn a lot of skills and learn to adjust for those situations. Like I said, one of the big things for me, the guitar might be screamingly loud and it's screaming loud the whole place. And I've already written all this automation is. So I'll just go to the plugin and just turn the output of the plugin down, the very last plugin, down maybe a dB, and suddenly it sits in the mix. And then maybe if I do, it's still loud in one section only, then maybe I'll reach to the automation. So that's an easy way of doing it. And then when I'm moving fast, maybe the cuts and boosts, they should be done on the plugin and last thing so I don't have to adjust my volume. But sometimes I'll adjust the volume. Don't beat yourself up if you get the result that you want, but you didn't do it perfectly. I don't know anybody that I personally respect who's an engineer, a mixer, or a producer that has one way of working and knows everything. I don't know if there is really one way of working. I feel like there's a million different ways of getting a great result. You seem to use Pro Tools a lot in mixing and mastering. Is it harder to mix and master in other DAWs, or does Pro Tools have that one edge that you'll always end up using it? I think firstly, to answer it, I have to give you a little bit of context. Pro Tools was the first DAW I ever used. And when it came out, it was, one of the first truly great audio editing digital audio workstations, DAWs, DAWs, as some people say. It was definitely at the time one of the first that could edit audio to the capabilities that it does. And most of the professionals I was working with were using tape and then transferring to Pro Tools and editing, and sometimes transferring back to tape, quite frankly. And it had this kind of strength. Now, I have so many friends that work in other DAWs, that work in Ableton Live, that work in Studio One, that work in Cubase, that work in Reaper, that work, you name it. I mean, insert your DAW into that list. GarageBand, even some of the more simplistic ones, and make records that you've heard on the radio in every single DAW you can imagine. And if you were to ask them most of the time why they use their DAW, it's probably a similar experience to me. They probably read something, an attribute, or had a friend that had it, a particular DAW, and then they ended up using it. And now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years, 20 years later, they're really proficient at it. So why would they want to stop and learn another DAW? Why do I use Pro Tools? Well, like I said, it's because I grew up using it. I know all the shortcuts. I can move around really quickly. Somebody asks me to do something, I can do it immediately. If that's you on Ableton Live, that's you on Logic, whatever your DAW is, FL Studio, if you can do work at the same rate and get great results, then fantastic. I think if I was to start again, I would probably recommend specific DAWs for not necessarily genres, but for different needs. Like Ableton Live is really well known for manipulating audio. It's functionality and capturing MIDI information and turning it into really incredibly exciting stuff is second to none. I worked with Salam Remy a couple of years ago, and he opened up Ableton Live, took the session I recorded on Pro Tools, put it in there, and just created all kinds of crazy, crazy stuff. And I was really, really impressed. And it was quick and easy to use. I don't know, if you were starting off and you were more in the dance world, then maybe you would go that route. For me, in a more pop rock based world, especially with emphasis on rock, having really good, like a linear way of recording and then being able to edit and move things around and tighten and loosen and do all of the fun things that you can do in Pro Tools, I still think it'd be the main DAW for me, but I'm not imposing that on you. I will say it is one of the most used. I don't know if it's like 50% of the world uses it. I don't know if it's as high as that, but it's definitely one of the most successful. So if you're asking me a question of like, should you learn it to be a professional? You don't have to, but it wouldn't be a bad idea. It's not a case of like, you have to learn Pro Tools. Do I think it's fantastic? Yes, I get great results with it. And personally, because I know the debate is going to happen below, we have done about 1,100 videos. We've done how many streams? Like a couple of hundred. Or we do one a week for the Academy over 2 years. So there's 3 years. So there's 150. We've done probably another 50 or 100 online. We've produced like a pro. Maybe we've done 250 to 300 live streams. We've had one live stream crash on us. And why do I emphasize that? Because we're streaming live with Pro Tools. We've got a software recording the screen. We've got another software beaming it to the world. And the point is we have like 3 like major softwares all eating up the RAM on the computer, eating up the CPU power. And we've had one crash. And that's it. So it's really interesting. And some of these streams last 3 hours. It's really interesting because people are always commenting to me like, oh, Pro Tools crashes all the time. Yeah, it crashes like once every few months for us. And we don't have a particularly fast computer. I think it's a cheese grater, Apple. We did max out the RAM, but it's still a really old computer. Really old computer. It's quad core. It's 8 years old. It's still running, and yeah, it's a tough one. I know Pro Tools is the. Let's be honest, Pro Tools is the DAW to hate. Everybody's like, as a rock pop producer, it does great stuff for me. But again, I'm not saying you have to use it over Reaper or Ableton or Cubase or any of these. I think use what you know. If you've already down the road and you know it, then great. But if you're asking me from a professional perspective, would it be a smart DAW to learn as well? Yeah, it wouldn't be a bad idea. It wouldn't be a bad idea because you'd be able to walk into a studio, any commercial studio, and start working, and set up the sessions and do all that kind of stuff. So from a commercial perspective, it's a really smart one to use, but it's not the only game in town. Now there are many, many options, and I'm supportive, honestly, of whatever you use. If you're making great music on a 4-track cassette, then great, God bless you. The tools are important, but they're not more important than the song you're recording, the performance, all of that other stuff before, the arrangement, the tempo, the key, everything. All of those things are far more important than the DAW. So thank you for a wonderful week. Thank you for so many great questions. Please enter to win the 2 giveaways. Check out David's course. There will be a link below. Have a marvelous time recording and mixing, and we'll see you all again very, very soon. So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, au revoir, adios.